Hello, I would like to talk to you today about a phrase you might have heard, trans women are women. Now I want to break down that phrase and dissect it a little bit, but first there's two key points that we need to understand. Now the first one is the term trans woman is actually a non-medical euphemism. It's not a clinical term. Come back to that. And the second one, what Amy just touched on, is the conflation of sexual orientation and gender identity. They are two distinct, different categories, and they actually have nothing to do with each other. Now, I want to break down the LGBT. There's actually no such thing as the LGBT. It's a concept of forced teaming or parasitic oppression by proxy. So if we break down the letters and analyse them, we've got LGB on one side, the side of reality, that's observable and falsifiable. On the other side, the spiritual belief side, we have TQ, transgenderism, and queer, which is a spiritual belief. Now, they don't actually belong together. There's no reason for them to be, and there's plenty of lesbian and gay people that feel this way. Now, there's a lot of science worshippers around these days that love to talk about that. Let's talk about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is observable and falsifiable. Gender identity is not. It is a spiritual belief. It's a very important concept for people to understand when they're trying to gain clarity of thought on the transgender issue. Now, let's take a hypothetical scenario. We may have an adult male. He may, a 50-year-old man, he may have kids, he may be married, and it doesn't actually matter what he self-reports. He may say that he is straight, but it doesn't actually matter. We can observe that man, or if he's unobserved, and if he has sex with men, and then he's not being observed, then chances are, despite what he says, despite what he self-reports, then he is not actually straight. So self-reporting has nothing to do with it. In the same stance, there are doctors and scientists and medical professionals that have objective ways to measure sexual orientation. It is observable and falsifiable. There are brain tests. We can measure attraction levels, heart rate, and then prove or falsify if somebody is gay or straight. The same cannot be said for your gender ideology. So somebody can self-report to be transgender, say that they're a woman, but there's no way for any doctor, scientist, medical professional to prove this or disprove it. It is not falsifiable, therefore it is a spiritual belief. It's a very, very important concept to understand. So, let's get back to that phrase, trans women are women, and we can break it down a little bit. Now that we understand that transgenderism is a spiritual belief, let's talk about the phrase trans woman. There's no such thing as a trans woman. That is a non-medical euphemism. Jordan Peterson talks about the need to have precise language. So if we're talking about radical changes to society, reforming society based on beliefs, it's important and it's fair that we insist on using precise and correct language. So, if somebody says they're a trans woman, we can interrupt them and say, no, there's no such thing as a trans woman. That's a non-medical euphemism. If we're going to discuss this, I insist that you use correct clinical language. If you look up the DSM-5, not once does it say the word trans woman. Not in there at all. It says transgender identified. So the clinical term is transgender identified male. Let's go back to our slogan and substitute that in with the clinical and correct terminology. Trans women are women. When we use correct, precise language, now becomes transgender identified males are women. Does not quite have the same ring to it. And we could even say males presenting as females are women. So, you can see there the importance of using correct language, and it's okay to stand up for our boundaries and insist that people use correct language. You'll notice when you get radical transgender activists and you stop them and you insist this, it gets them off script and it takes them aback, and they're unable to argue because they're not used to the scripted response of taking it off script. Now, I'd like to finish by talking about the phrase trans women are women, or even trans women. Now, what is it? Is it a statement? Is it an argument? Or is it a phrase of propaganda? we've clarified that gender identity is a spiritual belief. So therefore, that phrase now becomes dogmatic. It's a dogmatic slogan. So it has political implications. And if you look up propaganda, and I saw this in a video from Holly Lawford Smith where she talks about propaganda and cites a paper, and propaganda has three key facts. And that is, one, it's made up of lies, and it has it's intended to appeal to your emotion and also psychologically manipulate. So when you hear the phrase trans women are women, it's important to understand this is an attempt to coerce your beliefs. This is an attempt to control you and force you to deny reality. Nobody has the right to claim agency over your belief. It's okay to believe that humans are mammals. Like all mammals, we are sexually dimorphic species. We are unable to change sex.
Yes.
There's not a single mammal on this planet that is not sexually dimorphic, and there's not a single mammal on this planet that can change sex. The idea, it's okay to believe that, it's okay to stand up for your beliefs. I believe that the idea of being born in the wrong body is a spiritual belief, not only a spiritual belief, but it's a narcissistic, hedonistic, destructive one. And it's okay to stand up for our rights and to insist that people use clinical, precise language and understand that when activists, radical transgender activists, use terms like trans woman and phrases like trans women are women, this is propaganda, and it's used to coerce your beliefs and to force you to manifest these beliefs through your speech. And it compels you, and it's asking you to deny reality, and that's not okay. Trans women, there's no such thing. Transgender identified males, or males suffering from gender dysphoria or gender incongruence. Thank
Well
you.
done, Jack. Woo! Awesome.